Mary had a little lamb.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
Hey!
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
We love you. You are special. We're here to take care. It's going well. And I want to thank you for coming out. We're going to get you back and operating immediately. Thank you, everybody. What a crowd. What a turnout.
Oh, my God.
Thank our governor. Your governor has done a fantastic job. Governor Abbott, thank you very much. Who's right here someplace. He's right here. So we just want to thank your governor, Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, everybody, Dan. We want to thank the whole group. This has been a total cooperative effort. Again, we will see you soon. I will tell you, this is historic. It's epic what happened. But you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything. Thank you all, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, no. Ugh. What a crowd. What a turnout, everybody. Tip your waiters. Try the veal. I'll be here all week. Thank you. Oh, my God. Our president seems to be loving the hurricane. He seems to be loving the size of it. Have you noticed he's a size queen? He does. He seems to really be loving the size of Harvey. Harvey has girth. Harvey has length and breadth and depth. Harvey is... it keeps tweeting about how big it is. How big it is, like his inaugural crowds, right? Like the crowd in Phoenix. Did you see? You know, remember the crowd in Phoenix when he just had that meltdown last week? That crowd in Phoenix, he couldn't stop tweeting about this, and telling everybody in Phoenix about, oh, there are so many more people here than there are outside. There was supposed to be big protests. Where are they? And when we looked at the numbers, we were able to tell you that the inside crowd was about 4,000 people, and the outside crowd was about 5,000 protesters. So, I mean, he's a size queen. I've never seen anybody and Harvey is so huge and so big, and it's got such girth, and it's got such strength, and it's got such commanding presence. He's just freaking in love. He said nobody's ever seen anything like it. I've heard the words epic. I heard the words historic. What does he think? What is he, James Cameron accepting for Titanic? I mean, what is this thing, this obsession he has with size and little Marco and, well, your hands are tiny, I got no problem down here. I mean, this is unbelievable. He really likes this storm because he thinks that this is his chance to overtake George Bush, and Barack Obama on the size of their storms, on the size of their natural disasters. He's going to win the national disaster sweepstakes. But I'll tell you something, if you don't look out, this guy's also going to beat George Bush on the economic collapse sweepstakes too. So just be very careful. But right now he's having the time of his freaking life. He is actually enjoying this. And that is really, that is unbelievable. Here's his tweets. Historic, all in caps. Historic rainfall in Houston and all over Texas. Floods are unprecedented and more rain coming. Spirit of the people. Incredible. Thanks. For what? Making this the best disaster ever? I don't even understand. Then he tweeted, wow. Now experts are calling #Harvey a once-in-500-year flood, except they're calling it a once-in-1,000-year flood, except that we've had one of these 1,000-year floods 3 times in the last 18 months. Just saying. But he said they called #Harvey a once-in-500-year flood. We have an all-out effort going and going well. Why doesn't he just thank climate change, who made it all possible? I'd like to thank the Mother Nature and the woman behind climate change who made all of this possible. You like me. You really, really like me. I mean, this is like the craziest, and he stands on top of a truck, but he's in Corpus Christi where they're not flooded. And I know this because I'm dog sitting for my friends, Steve and Karen, who live here, also at zero, sea level in Florida. It's our turn next, right? And that's why it's so concerning how he's behaving. But they went to Austin. That's whose dog I'm babysitting. Karen and Steve, they went that way. They went into the storm. And now they're trying to come home, and their plane was delayed because he went there. He went to Corpus Christi. And so they're sitting at the airport while they marshal in his plane. Do you know what I mean? Melania changes her shoes from 5-inch Manolos. Those were beautiful. They're works of art, those Manolos. But she dressed today for the floods, and she chose to wear a designer green bomber jacket, like a little, outdoorsy look. She did that. And then she wore a pair of these cropped wide leg pants, which, ugly. Don't do it. It's like pedal pushers with bell bottoms on them. Oh, it's not a good look. She's 9 feet tall. She could probably wear anything, and that was terrible. Just terrible. And then topped it off with a pair of 5-inch Manolo crocodile shoes. Those shoes had to be, I don't know, $1,500, $1,600. And then Twitter went crazy, which is where he lives. Okay, he lives on Twitter. Twitter went crazy saying, Melania's dressed for the floods. Look at the stilettos, right? So when she got off the plane, she put on a brand new pair of unscuffed white sneakers. I mean, these people they live in a bubble. They have absolutely no clue what it's like to spend 3 days without electricity in waist-high water, walking through. I mean, the stories that people are telling are so unbelievable because we have seriously set the bar here. No place in America has ever seen this much rain ever. Do you get the breadth of what I'm saying? And instead of him cheering that, climate change is happening, or instead of understanding that when he gave that infrastructure speech ahead of his, meltdown the other day. Remember, he just completely melted down and defended the Nazis and did everything. But remember, before he defended the Nazis and the white supremacists, before he said that there was some moral equivalency between people who would protest with every ounce of their being, who, by the way, were being shot at by the white supremacists. Did you know that? Yeah, they were being shot at by the white supremacists. And I told you there was a guy in a garage. There was videotape of this guy in a garage who was beaten like within an inch of his life by the white supremacists, okay? And it turns out that 3 men have been charged in the Charlottesville attacks on the counter-protesters. But remember that day that Donald Trump was, I could give you the story. The guy who was beaten, his name is DeAndre Harris. Okay, he was beaten mercilessly on videotape with a metal pipe by 3 white supremacists. And the 3 men who beat him have been charged with felonies now. And they attacked counter protesters at their Unite the Right rally. 18-year-old Daniel Borden of Mason, Ohio. He was part of a group of 6 men who violently beat DeAndre Harris in the parking garage. And the parking garage just so happened to be next door to the police station. Yeah, there was no response right then and there. No. DeAndre Harris suffered a broken wrist and a gash to his head. He was stapled together with 10 staples in his head. That's how they kept his head together. The other suspect is Richard Preston. He's 52 years old. He is seen on video where that was taken by the American Civil Liberties Union, and he took out a pistol. Now, this is really sick. He took out a gun, and he fired a round toward a counter-protester, and he then turns and walks away. He is now known to be the Imperial Wizard of the Confederate White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan based in Maryland. The Imperial Wizard. We're off to see the wizard. And James Field, was arrested because he's the guy, 32 years old, who killed Heather Heyer. And then there's another guy that they're looking for in the beating of DeAndre Harris. I think his name is, I know his name is Alex Michael Ramos. He's 33. He also was involved in the beating of Mr. Harris. Somebody better tell him, he needs to do an ancestry test. Alex Michael Ramos. You need a little ancestry. Got to follow your leaves. Just follow your leaves. Somehow I don't think you're coming up, Caucasian. I don't think you're from the Caucasus. I don't think that you, are Nordic or Austrian. So anyway, that day that the president made this moral equivalency between the people who were being shot at and beaten with metal pipes and the people who beat them and shot at them, saying they were fine people, he was trying to give a little speech on infrastructure. Right? Do you remember? Nobody remembers the infrastructure part. But he was trying to give a speech on infrastructure. And he was saying that what he was going to do was make it much easier to get permits to build in places where permitting is difficult. You know what kind of places he was talking about, right? Well, I hope you do now. He was talking about places like flood zones, like Houston. He was talking about places that are like at 0 sea level, like here in Florida. And I just want you to know that, everybody skipped over, that he was undoing an executive order because he's obsessed with Barack Obama, as you know. And so everything that Barack Obama ever did or signed has to be undone and re-signed, into Trump land. And so while Obama, saw the flooding and the flood zones and the building of, low-income housing, which is typically built in flood zones in this country because it's cheaper for the developers to buy that land than it is for them to buy land that's not in a flood zone. And so a lot of the housing that's built for, lower-income Americans is built in floodplains, in flood zones. And so Obama issued an executive order requiring that if you're going to build something in a flood zone, that you secure it, that you elevate it, that it has to be at least 2 feet higher than 0. Do you know what I mean? You have to elevate the building. This is what Trump undid the other day before he, was loving on the Nazis. And this went like, woo, over everybody's head. And now he's down there marveling at the size and the breadth and the depth and the manliness of Harvey and the power of Harvey and the destruction that a guy named Harvey could cause. And nobody is paying any attention to the fact that, before he defended the Nazis, he issued an executive order making it easier.
We're going to get infrastructure built quickly, inexpensively, relatively speaking, and the permitting process will go very, very quickly. No longer will we tolerate one job-killing delay after another.
Job-killing.
No longer will we accept a broken system that benefits consultants and lobbyists at the expense of hardworking Americans. Now, I knew the process very well, probably better than anybody. I had to get permits for this building and many of the buildings I built, all of the buildings I built in Manhattan and many other places.
Okay, first of all, when he plays dirty politics, he always has, his father did too, to get the permits to build low-income housing. His father did. Then, of course, he wouldn't rent to black people, and then they went to court, and the court said you have to, and then they said okay, and then they said no, you have to put an ad in the paper saying that you're an equal opportunity, a supplier of housing. They did that, and then when black people came, they told them there was no room at the inn, and they got caught because they had monitors come in, looking for apartments, but they were really working for the government, or they were working for the ACLU or the NAACP, and they got caught again. So anyway, he has been a dirty politician in New York, well known. I mean, if you read any of his biographies, Michael D'Antonio's will do, it's just amazing. If you read David K. Johnston's biography of Donald, then you know that, he was paying people to get permits, okay? And this is what he's talking about, that he shouldn't have to pay. Because permits require that you make sure that the place where you're going to build can support that kind of traffic in New York, for instance, or in a flood zone, that it can support, taking on water in the case of a hurricane. Now, the executive order that he issued right there revoked the Obama-era directive that established flood risk standards for infrastructure projects built in areas prone to flooding or subject to the effects of sea level rise, just like those that are now sinking and underwater in Tejas. Now, what you may not know is Houston already has some of the laxest building regulations for structures in potential flood zones. And so by doing this, when we do pay the money to save them, to rescue them, the federal funds will go flowing in. They're going to rebuild on the floodplains all over again.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Yeah, you could buy tile at a chain store if you wanted to. You could wait for a kid to try and answer your questions about what's this made of, or how do I install it, or what's in stock. But what if you wanted serious craftsmanship? What if you wanted custom design, handmade, to order from your imagination, or an inspiration photo that you love? Probably you think you can't anymore, but I did. When it was time to shop tile, I came across a family-owned business that still handcrafts each and every individual tile, matching your colors, your inspiration, your design. Tempest Tile Works. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and they still handcraft the most magnificent tile. Let them match to your fabrics or to your countertops or to anything you can envision for your bath or kitchen. Teeny tiny tiles to oversized, their art or yours. It's all doable, it's all affordable, and it's all individually made just for your project. Visit Tempest Tile Works and look at their amazing gallery of designs and styles, and give up the chain stores. Tempest Tile Works, custom made. TempestTileWorks.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day 7,000 white and Filipino lettuce workers in California's Salinas Valley walked out on strike. Salinas was the lettuce capital of the world. The division of labor in the valley was largely ethnically based. Filipinos did much of the field labor, while whites worked in the packing sheds. At the time, Filipinos made up 40% of the total agricultural workforce in the Salinas Valley. They had founded the Filipino Labor Union a year earlier. White packing shed workers had organized into the AFL's Vegetable Packers Association. While the VPA had been reluctant to work with the FLU, they now sought to join forces in strike action. Both unions agreed neither would return to work until both had achieved victory. Together, they demanded wage increases, union recognition, and better working conditions. Losing $100,000 a day, the growers soon imported scabs of all races. They enlisted the California Highway Patrol to arrest striking Filipinos on incitement and vagrancy charges. Soon, the VPA agreed to arbitration, leaving the FLU to continue the strike alone. Some speculated the members were threatened with the loss of their charter if they refused to return to work. The striking Filipino workers continued to organize job actions and experienced increased retaliation as a result. VPA leaders publicly distanced themselves from the Filipino strikers, and racially charged vigilante violence intensified. It culminated in the burning down of the labor camp, where hundreds of Filipino workers lived a month after the strike began. Vigilantes then drove as many as 800 Filipinos from the valley at gunpoint. The strike was officially called off, and those that remained returned to work. By October, both unions had won wage increases.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
But a lot of people are pointing out that you voted against aid for Sandy after that catastrophic storm up in the Northeast, that package back in 2012. And they're pointing at you and saying you're asking for money now when you weren't willing to help the people in the Northeast. What do you have to say to them?
Well, look, there's time for political sniping later. I think our focus needs to be on this crisis and this disaster.
These are people who needed money and who needed funding right after that storm. I covered those people. Many of them, just like those in Houston, lost absolutely everything they owned.
Well, Katie, of course that's right. And the accurate thing to say is that I and a number of others enthusiastically and emphatically supported hurricane relief for Sandy. Hurricane relief and disaster relief has been a vital federal role for a long, long time, and it should continue. The problem with that particular bill is it became a $50 billion bill that was filled with unrelated pork. 2/3 of that bill had nothing to do with Sandy. And what I said then and still believe now is that it's not right for politicians to exploit a disaster and people are hurting to pay for their own political wish list. Disaster relief needs to be focused on the victims of disaster relief, and I supported that for Sandy, disaster relief there, and I would support that anywhere there's a major disaster without getting distracted by political unnecessary pork spending.
Liar, liar, pants on fire. 3 Pinocchios he gets for that one. 3, everybody, 3. Yeah, no, he didn't vote for Sandy relief. He did not. He voted for a piece of crap bill that Mick Mulvaney put on the floor that did not pass, that was killed. Mick Mulvaney is now our budget director to Donald Trump. Mick Mulvaney's bill had like, a tenth of what, the Sandy bill, $50 billion. And the Washington Post, the fact checker, it's all on my homework page, randyrhodes.com. Just click on the homework section. The fact checker at the Washington Post actually looked at the Sandy bill after he said this and said he was so full of crap that almost every single nickel, almost every single dime that was appropriated in the Sandy relief bill was for Sandy relief. The Congressional Research Office looked at it. The CBO looked at it. Everybody scored it. It was for Sandy relief. And you know what's really interesting? I think there were 25 Texas delegate members, meaning in the House, there are 23 House members who represent various districts in Texas, because Texas is huge. It's bigger than you, Trump. It's huge. So they get 23 House members and 2 senators. And Cruz and Cornyn voted against the Sandy relief bill, and so did all but one of the Texas House delegation. Every single one of the people from Texas voted against Sandy relief package for the Northeast. Every single one of them. And there's very little price for them to pay in Texas for letting people drown and die in New Jersey and New York and Rhode Island and Washington, D.C. From a storm that came out of the Caribbean. They don't even know what the Caribbean is. Gulf of Mexico is as far as their geographical, relationships go. So this is like bizarre and heinous. And now we're going to have to go through this whole thing. I mean, Congress is still on vacation. And when they come back next week, and they do come back next week, but they only have 12 work days in the month of September. That's all they have. And they have to raise the debt ceiling so we can borrow more money. They need to pass a budget. They'll probably do a continuing resolution. And now we've got to do this relief package for Houston because it's the humane thing to do. And guys like Ted Cruz are such giant hypocrites because now that they're in trouble, of course, they're going to want $150 billion. Mick Mulvaney, who's the budget director, when he passed this little minuscule crappy thing that was supposed to be Sandy relief, which obviously failed, he also wanted to offset the cost of the Sandy relief package. He wanted spending cuts to save the people in Staten Island and New Jersey and New York and Washington, D.C. He wanted offsets. Today, I'm starting to see that, the Freedom Caucus, who comes from these fakakta places, they might want offsets for raising the debt ceiling for the budget. They might want offsets, right? And so I'm wondering, are they going to dig their heels in and want offsets for the hurricane relief package? Because if they do, here's a prediction from me. I make creepy ones because they mostly come true. They will put on the table to be cut the money that is going in to fund Robert Mueller's investigation into President Trump's Russia ties. That will be on the chopping block. And that's how they will stop the investigation into Trump and his relationship with Russia, which is ongoing and has been a long, long, long relationship. I mean, seriously long. Here's what the Washington Post was reporting today.
So the Washington Post reports that a top executive from Trump's real estate company emailed the personal spokesman. I'm not making this up.
No.
Emailed the personal spokesman for Vladimir Putin because Trump wanted to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Now,
but I thought
the good news is, though, Mika, the good news is they said they didn't have contact with anybody in Russia. So this couldn't have happened during the campaign. Hold on, let me look at this Post story.
Wait, check the calendar.
Oh, wait a second. It happened during the presidential campaign.
Oh, crap.
The email from longtime Trump aide Michael Cohen represents the most direct outreach documented by a top Trump aide to a similarly senior member of Putin's government, according to the Washington Post. The reporting also says it provides an example of Trump business officials talking straight to the Kremlin, seeking assistance in advancing Donald Trump's business interests. Now, Cohen, who says he discussed the deal with Trump several times, tells NBC, quote, "To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Trump was never in contact with anyone about this proposal other than me on 3 occasions, including signing a non-binding letter of intent in 2015. Now, this is what I want to know, Mika, because there's more. But I want to know, did Donald Trump help Cohen draft that statement on Air Force One? Because it sounds a lot like the adoption statement that Donald Trump helped them draft when he lied, when he got busted lying on Air Force One because his lawyers were on the ground. He was in the air. So hold on, let me get this straight. A guy who is obsessed with Russia is going to send Michael Cohen, say, hey, you go take care of Vladimir Putin and getting a letter of intent for us to build Trump Tower in Moscow. Hey, I'm busy. I'm not.
Okay, here's an update. This just came across. In addition to the Trump Organization, Michael Cohen, who is Trump's personal attorney and the executive vice president for the Trump Organization at the same time. Yes, there are emails now. There are emails from Michael Cohen directly to the Kremlin. Which guy in the Kremlin? Dmitry Peskov. Dmitry Peskov. Who is him? Who is he? Who is him? He is he's the communications director for the Kremlin. Okay, Fareed Zakaria, actually interviewed him a long time. It seems like a long time ago. I guess it was a month or 2 or maybe 3 ago. Listen.
What was it that the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak was talking to so many of Donald Trump's associates about?
This is his job. He was talking about bilateral relations. He was talking about what is going on in the United States, so we have a better understanding in Moscow. This is what is being performed by every ambassador of Russia abroad, every ambassador of the United States abroad, including in Moscow. Because the more ambassador talks to people in his country of residence, the better job he does.
Did he have similar meetings with Clinton campaign officials? Because I don't know of any.
Well, if you look at some people connected with Hillary Clinton during her campaign, you would probably see that he had lots of meetings of that kind. But there were no meetings about electoral process.
He's lying. There were no meetings. In fact, Fareed Zakaria, CNN, GPS, the whole thing, they all went and looked for any, Russian interaction between anybody that worked on Hillary's campaign, anybody at all, and they found zero interaction. So this is Dmitry. Listen, he's a world heavyweight champion liar. He has to be. He works for the freaking Kremlin. But here's the thing. Michael Cohen, who is Trump's attorney and the executive vice president for the Trump Organization, now has, produced emails. And in going through the emails, they have been leaked. And this is what one of them says. It says, this is from Michael Cohen, Trump's attorney, and the executive vice president of the Trump Organization to that man right there, Dmitry Peskov, who just lied on the CNN, about, it's nothing. I mean, Hillary Clinton had the same kind of no. He wrote, over the past few months, this is Michael Cohen, I've been working with a company based in Russia regarding a development of a Trump Tower Moscow project in Moscow City, Cohen wrote Peskov. Without getting into lengthy specifics, the communication between our two sides has stalled. As this project is too important, I am requesting your assistance. I respectfully request someone, preferably you, Dmitry, contact me so that I might discuss the specifics as well as arrange meetings with the appropriate individuals. I thank you in advance for your assistance and look forward to hearing from you soon, Cohen wrote. Now, that is the most direct interaction between Trump's lawyer and the Kremlin. And this happened during the election cycle, okay? This happened when Donald Trump was campaigning in, I guess he was in Iowa, and he was all over the place, right? And this was going on. And what's really interesting is that when you asked Donald Trump or you asked anybody whether or not they had any contacts at all or knew anybody who had contacts, the answer has been consistently no one. And then you find emails. So, listen.
I was hoping that we could get a yes or no answer on one of these questions involving Russia. Can you say whether you are aware that anyone who advised your campaign had contacts with Russia during the course of the election?
Contacts.
Well, I told you, General Flynn obviously was dealing, so that's one person, but General he was dealing Flynn, as he should have been.
During the election?
No, nobody that I know of. Nobody
so you're not aware of any contacts during the course of the election?
How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is a ruse. Yeah, I know you have to get up and ask a question, so important. Russia is a ruse. I have nothing to do with Russia. Haven't made a phone call to Russia in years. Don't speak to people from Russia. Not that I wouldn't. I just have nobody to speak to. I spoke to Putin twice. He called me on the election. I told you this. And he called me on the inauguration a few days ago. We had a very good talk, especially the second one. Lasted for a pretty long period of time. I'm sure you probably get it because it was classified, so I'm sure everybody in this room perhaps has it. But we had a very, very good talk. I have nothing to do with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does. Now, Manafort has totally denied it. He denied it. Now, people knew that he was a consultant over in that part of the world for a while, but not for Russia. I think he represented Ukraine or people having to do with Ukraine or people that, whoever. But people knew that. Everybody knew that.
But in his capacity as your campaign manager, was he in touch with Russian officials during the election?
You know what? He said no. I can only tell you what he... Now, he was replaced long before the election. You know that, right? He was replaced long before the election. When all of this stuff started coming out, it came out during the election. But Paul Manafort, who's a good man also, by the way, Paul Manafort was replaced long before the election took place. He was only there for a short period of time.
Right. And Manafort was, Manafort was just there for a short period of time. He was there to shepherd the entire campaign through a contested convention, a Republican convention, where people didn't want to nominate Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. And that's why Manafort was hired, because he was a political expert, where all these little Zoe ideas, all these little, sweet little country mice had no political experience shepherding a nominee, through a contested convention. So once they used him, they dismissed him. But Flynn, of course, was made national security advisor. And we found out that Flynn was blackmailable by the Russians, and that Sally Yates went to the White House and told this to Donald Trump, who still insisted Flynn stay on as our national security advisor, and then fired James Comey instead of Michael Flynn. Okay. So anyway, what we just found out was that from September 2015 all the way through January 2016, there was an ongoing negotiation with a letter of intent signed between the Trump Organization and Vladimir Putin's Russia that was a licensing agreement so that a developer in Russia could build a Trump Tower and stick Donald Trump's name on it. And that over the past 40 years, Donald Trump has consistently tried to build a Trump Tower in Moscow.
Clear for takeoff. The Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Local 701 auto mechanics are entering their second month of their strike at 185 Illinois auto dealers. Local 701's Sam Cicinelli says a big issue is auto mechanics' wages getting shortchanged roughly 6 hours a week. That's because the dealers and automakers have lowered their book times for repairs, and the actual repairs take longer to do.
We are looking to shorten the gap on approximately 6 hours that go uncompensated for mechanics that are on the clock for 40 hours. It's 15% that they forego of their wages per week. In some cases, a lot of cases, they're on the clock for upwards of 50 hours trying to make book time to at least go home with a 34-hour check.
Cicinelli says that federal mediation sessions are attempting to help reach a deal to end the strike. He says the 1,944 striking Local 701 mechanics have gotten a lot of public support and backing from other unions. Cicinelli says the striking mechanics are unified and their fight is a middle-class workers' fight, and they want to thank the public for supporting the strike.
This is a middle-class ringing the bell to keep the middle class preserved. We're fighting their fight. We're fighting everybody's fight, even the ones that don't have a voice in the workplace. So thank you so much for your support. Our members truly appreciate it. We will prevail. I'm confident of that. Out of 1,944, we only have 4 people that cross the picket line.
Joanne Powers has more labor news.
Labor unions have joined the torrent of vocal criticism directed at Donald Trump's pardoning Friday of former Maricopa County, Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Arpaio was convicted for refusing to comply with a court order to stop racial profiling practices. Unite Here, primarily representing workers in the hospitality industry, mobilized Latino voters to oust Arpaio last November after the sheriff spent years terrorizing and harassing Latino workers, regardless of immigration status. The union described the pardon as an attack on immigrants writ large and says it shows Trump's support for Arpaio's illegal police misconduct, including racial profiling and institutionalized systematic discrimination against Latino workers. Unite Here says, quote, "We are deeply troubled that Trump is pardoning criminals and sympathizing with racial bigots instead of protecting the law-abiding, tax-paying immigrant workers who make the American economy run and make this country truly great." United Farm Workers President Arturo Rodriguez also condemned Trump's action as shameful, saying, quote, "The president should not be pardoning someone who has been so vicious toward immigrants and who has openly flouted a federal judge's order to stop his racial discrimination."
WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
In April of 1865, General Ulysses Grant accepted Robert E. Lee's surrender to end the American Civil War. A month and a half later, President Lincoln's successor, Andrew Johnson, issued a proclamation of amnesty and pardon to the former Confederates who had supported what was referred to by President Johnson as the Late Rebellion. The proclamation was a blanket pardon of everyone in the South that had participated in any way against the Union, but with several significant exceptions. The proclamation listed 14 classes of persons not pardoned, which were mostly military and government leaders. Those who were excluded, including General Robert E. Lee, were required to make an individual request to the President of the United States, which appeal included filing a sworn amnesty oath with the Secretary of State, William Seward. Join us again next time for Robert E. Lee's efforts to get back his U.S. citizenship. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
The Randi Rhodes Air Force. The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
There was something missing from what President Trump said. I hope he will say it later today, but that's the empathy for the people who suffer. That, with my opinion, should have been the first thing he should have said, was that his heart goes out to those people in Houston who are going through this, and that the government is here to help them to recover from this. And then secondly, the job of the president is to thank those who are the first responders doing all the rescuing. You know, that is a huge morale boost to those working so hard away from their families. Their homes are often flooded, but they're sacrificing themselves to save others, and the president needs to thank them. That's what a presidential visit can accomplish. I hope President Trump will return to that in some other public setting later today.
That was Ari Fleischer, the press secretary for George W. Bush, criticizing the appearance yesterday by the president in very dry Austin. I shouldn't say very dry. My friends, Karen and Steve, who, went into the hurricane because their children live there. They flew into the hurricane. And they just came back this morning to pick up their damn dog, who's just the sweetest. Right? A big-ass dog, but sweet dog, just big, really huge. But anyway, they just came back from Austin, and even their son, who's got a house there, he's on higher ground. Austin is hill country. It's the only pretty part of Texas. But, okay, in my opinion, I've lived all over Texas. I've lived in North Texas, hunkering down for tornadoes. Dallas I lived in, which was, very strange. It's very formal in that cowboy sort of way. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like suits, ties, cowboy hats, and boots. It's an acquired taste, and if you don't have that taste, acquire it, apparently, if you're going to live there. And then West Texas, which is nothing but desert. And, South Texas, which is part of this, but I only went as far south as San Antonio, and this is even further south. So they were in Austin, which is hill country, which is very pretty. San Angelo's not so bad, but their kids got a house, and they're on higher ground, but on the side of the house are, drainage ditches and things like, and the water was up to his steps, didn't really make it into the house yet. But last night was really like the cherry on the cake of the day. Because last night Harvey had gone out over the Gulf and made landfall again, anew. And I'm reading stories today. Oh my God, this is just, there are no words for stories like this, except that it's devastating. It's not, Trump, this is the problem. Trump sees this as a way to distinguish his natural disaster crisis from Obama's natural disaster crisis and even W's natural disaster crisis, because his is the biggest and the best. He's calling this epic. That's the wrong word. This is devastating. This is not epic, Mr. President. And when he went to Corpus yesterday, he put himself outside of a firehouse. He did not put himself anywhere near any victims. And he said, what a crowd, what a turnout. And then, got a smattering of golf applause, which is, that. And then held up the Texas flag, which is like, holding up a bottle of water in front of the people in Beaumont right now. People would just go crazy. But that was Ari Fleischer. And he said that he went on to say that what the president is missing, and it's true, what the president is missing is empathy for the people who suffer. Because in Trump's world, the only people who exist are the people who support him, the people in front of him at any given moment.
The number of first responders, volunteers, people sacrificing themselves and their families to go out and rescue strangers. Learn one of the vignettes. Talk about somebody by name who did something. Talk, of course, about the officer who died drowning. Right. These are the individual stories that stir us and make us connected as Americans, that when calamity hits, we help one another. That's what a president should talk about, and he should talk about it by name of those who do it, and to say thank you.
Yeah, well, he said, nothing of the sort. I don't expect that anything will come from him because, today he's back in Missouri. He's out on the campaign trail again. And why Missouri? He's out in Missouri because he's targeting Claire McCaskill, a Democratic senator who's up for re-election this cycle. And he's, trying to win support for a tax plan. Now, by the way, his budget and his tax plan slashes funding for all of the federal agencies that he is counting on for their performance in this, rescue and recovery thing. If Trump's budget passes, this will be, FEMA's farewell performance. This will be HUD's farewell performance. This will be the National Weather Service's farewell performance. The NOAA, the Ark. They named themselves after the freaking Ark. Jeez, I think they know what they're doing. But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they're all in Trump's budget. With massive cuts to their budget, just like the State Department is being, dismembered. So it doesn't make any sense, at all. And nothing he does or says is ever going to make any sense to us because it doesn't serve us. It serves him to do whatever it is he's going to do. So, that aside, you got to say that the only thing that Texas would have to protect themselves from the next disaster under Trump's budget is his stupid wall, which he is threatening to shut down the entire government in this time of crisis. He is threatening to shut down the entire government if he doesn't get money for his stupid wall that he promised Mexico would pay for. Now, that wall, it better be like a massive flood wall with a dome to cover all of Texas from the rain. If it's going to, his budget actually puts billions of dollars into the wall on the Mexican border, but it leaves the border with the Gulf of Mexico wide open. So now I'm reading the stories. Now I'm looking at the picture. Now I'm sick. I'm really sick because, at the beginning of this thing, I guess it was Sunday, I was on my Facebook page arguing with a bunch of cult members, Trump cult members. And they were saying how he's got this. He's got this. He got 3,000 National Guardsmen. And I'm like, oh, my God, you got 6.5 million people in the Houston metro area alone. Do you know it's the fourth largest city in the country? And growing up in the biggest city in the country, I grew up in New York. Knowing what it's like when we had 9/11, when you have some sort of a disaster, and knowing how much money and how many first responders and how many different agencies need to be involved in all this, you kind of like look at this natural disaster and you're stunned that there were only 3,000. National Guardsmen. All of a sudden today, Greg Abbott gives this big ass, briefing. Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, Republican, who's going to make it, he made it like nearly impossible. Wait till these people actually come through this. This isn't the time to, talk about it because they're not listening. They're trying to stay alive right now. But after this, when they start to call with their complaints about their insurance claims, trust me, the Republicans made it almost impossible for them to get their insurance claims answered in a timely manner. Just trust me. And I already know it. And I already am able to, I won't be able to help them. I'll just be able to inform them about who did this to them, what's happening, why it's happening, and what it is that is happening to them. But, okay, that said, Abbott today said, okay, and FEMA is asking for volunteers to volunteer for the next couple of years. And then I look at the National Guard, there were 3,000 of them and, whatever. Today they said, all right, now we're requesting, federal guardsmen. Now we're requesting guardsmen from other states. We're talking to other governors. Now all of a sudden they're talking about they need 30,000 National Guardsmen. They need guys who are coming back from their deployments from Afghanistan and Iraq. They need them to return home to save the people of Houston and the people of Beaumont and the people of Rockport. It's just unbelievable. Last night, I'm sure you heard the story about the family of 6 that were in a van and the van just got swept away. I'm sure you heard about the police officer who was a 34-year veteran of the Houston police force. He was leaving Sunday night to try and help people, and it was dark and it was raining, and he drove under an underpass and he didn't know how deep the water was, and his car just filled up with water. He couldn't open the door, he couldn't open the windows, and he drowned. What a terrible, terrible, horrible way to die. Because you're aware of it. This is like one of my biggest fears, that I would be aware of a slow impending doom. Everybody wants to go in their sleep. Everybody wants to go, in a woman. Everybody wants that. Yes, even the gay ones. Everybody wants to go in that manner. But, to know. And then I saw the most horrific story. And this one was the fire rescue department in Beaumont, Texas, came across a shivering toddler, an 18-month-old baby. And the baby was, shivering and clinging to a float. And the float was actually the baby's dead mother, who was also in a car, and her car filled up with water and floated out. I don't even know how this woman, was overwhelmed. I don't even know what happened. All I know is that there was a floating woman, and a baby was clinging to the floating woman, and it turned out that was the baby's mother. Oh, it's just a fire rescue team in a boat caught up to them about a half mile downstream of where this happened. I mean, this is just wretched stuff. And they're telling us volunteers and we need more. And it's unbelievable. And Ted Cruz is busy lying. He's twisting his body into every single solitary position noted in the Kama Sutra to try and bend away from what the Texas delegation did to the Sandy bill, which was they all walked away from it. They all voted no. The entire Texas delegation, everyone except for one member of the House, both the Texas senators, Cornyn and Cruz, voted no. Pence, he wanted, in Katrina even, he wanted all the spending on FEMA and the spending on search and rescue and the spending on everything. He wanted it all offset with other cuts. And of course, where are these cuts going to come from? They're going to come from these agencies that actually try and warn people about impending doom, like the National Weather, so the NOAA predictors, the Storm Hunter aircraft that fly in and in and in over and over and over again to try and monitor the barometric pressure, try to see if it's dropping, try to see what's happening to the storm, try to see the eye wall, try and figure out what direction, and their forecasts are pretty freaking accurate. And the sciencey people, do their job, and then the people in Congress, they denounce the science, which saves lives every time, we heed it. It's just amazing. So, listen, disaster funding is one of the things in Trump's budget. All the federal government agencies that he is counting on right now to make him look good are the exact things in his budget that he's slashing. So what does he do today? He goes to Missouri, and he targets Claire McCaskill by supposedly trying to sell us his new tax plan. Except here's the dirty little secret. He doesn't have a tax plan. Again, he's going to farm it out and let Congress do what it wants. There is no tax plan. So when Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked, well, he's out there selling his tax plan, and, he's sending people out to West Virginia, he's sending people out to Missouri to target Claire McCaskill. He's sending people out to Nevada to target Dean Heller. Okay, this is what he's doing. They said, but what is he actually selling? I mean, can he give numbers? She goes, no, he can't give numbers. Because he's selling a vision. He's not selling a plan. He's selling a vision. A vision is what you get when you drink paint thinner. A vision is not a plan. You cannot govern this country with a vision. And if his vision is, tax cuts for the wealthy at the expense of everybody else, then his budget makes sense. And you realize that if there's no place for government in this rescue, in this operation that's going on now, then what is government's role?
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Yeah, you could buy tile at a chain store if you wanted to. You could wait for a kid to try and answer your questions about what's this made of, or how do I install it, or what's in stock. But what if you wanted serious craftsmanship? What if you wanted custom design, handmade to order from your imagination or an inspiration photo that you love. Probably you think you can't anymore, but I did. When it was time to shop tile, I came across a family-owned business that still handcrafts each and every individual tile, matching your colors, your inspiration, your design. Tempest Tile Works. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and they still handcraft the most magnificent tile. Let them match to your fabrics or to your countertops or to anything you can envision for your bath or kitchen. Teeny tiny tiles to oversized, their art or yours. It's all doable, it's all affordable, and it's all individually made just for your project. Visit Tempest Tile Works and look at their amazing gallery of designs and styles and give up the chain stores. Tempest Tile Works, custom made. TempestTileWorks.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day labor leader Luisa Moreno was born in Guatemala City. As a young woman, she fought for the admission of women into Guatemalan universities. After attending journalism school in Mexico City, Luisa moved to New York with her husband and worked as a seamstress. Outraged by low pay, racial discrimination, and poor working conditions, she led organizing efforts on the job. During the Great Depression, she worked as a full-time union organizer, first with the AFL, organizing black and Latina cigar rollers in Florida. But she also became active with the Communist Party and joined CIO efforts to organize cannery workers. Luisa led unionizing efforts of pecan shelling women workers in San Antonio, Texas, and then of cannery workers in Los Angeles. In 1938, Luisa helped organize the Spanish-speaking People's Congress. During World War II, she fought against discrimination in hiring of Mexicans in oil and war-related industries. In the 1940s, she became centrally involved in high-profile legal defense cases of Mexican-American youth prosecuted on frame-up charges. These included work around the 1942 Sleepy Lagoon case and then of victims of the Zoot Suit riots a year later. She continued union work in California, helping to organize and represent walnut pickers. By 1950, she was caught in the crosshairs of the McCarthy-era witch hunts. Luisa was targeted by Operation Wetback and offered citizenship status in return for testimony against radical labor leader Harry Bridges. When she refused, she faced deportation on the accusation that she had once been a member of the Communist Party. She returned to Guatemala and continued organizing workers throughout Central America. Luisa Moreno died in Guatemala in 1992. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
All things Randy at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The problem with that particular bill is it became a $50 billion bill that was filled with unrelated pork. Two-thirds of that bill had nothing to do with Sandy. And what I said then and still believe now is that it's not right for politicians to exploit a disaster and people are hurting to pay for their own political wish list.
What was wrong was for Ted Cruz to exploit the disaster for political gain, and that's what he was doing. The fact of the matter is that is an absolute falsehood that two-thirds of the $50 billion did not go to Sandy aid. It's an absolute falsehood. It was untrue when it was said then. And listen, let's remember what Senator Cruz was trying to do at the time. He was trying to be the most conservative, the most fiscally conservative person in the world. And what I said at the time, as you might recall, is someday it's going to come to Texas. Right. It just does. If you have a coastal area, whether it's on the Gulf Coast, the Atlantic, and Pacific Coast, a disaster is going to come to you. And when it does, I'm going to promise him that New Jersey Congress people will stand up and do the right thing.
Okay. This sort of takes your breath away, right? Ted Cruz is probably the only politician out there who can make Donald Trump warm and empathetic by comparison, okay? And he is also the only one who can make Chris Christie seem like an elder statesman full of gravitas. That's how bad Ted Cruz is. So the Republicans must be so thankful to God for Ted Cruz. Because as long as Ted Cruz is around, Republicans will not be the absolute worst. Ted Cruz alone will claim that mantle. Now, Chris Christie was all over I mean, he did every cable TV show. He was on Fox. He was on MSNBC. He was everywhere trying to point out that Cruz was just lying.
Senator Cruz was playing politics in 2012, trying to make him himself look like the biggest conservative in the world. And what I said at the time, both to him
now
and
you'll
to
see where
everybody
there's
else
talking
was,
points,
if
though.
you represent a coastal state, don't do this, because your day is going to come, and you're going to expect people to help you. 2/3 of the bill was not pork. As you know, Washington Post did a fact check on this yesterday. I mean, it is an absolute outright falsehood. And the fact is that that money is rebuilding New Jersey and rebuilding New York still to today, because that's how long this kind of thing takes. And what I'm urging all the people to do is, Hurricane Andrew, they passed the bill in 10 days. Hurricane Katrina, they passed the bill in 6 days. Sandy was 66 days.
Oh, my God.
We need to get back to the Andrew and Katrina stage. Congress needs to get back to work next week and pass a bill that starts to fund the recovery. It should not be connected to the debt ceiling. It shouldn't be connected to offsets, because if the federal government's not here, Chris, to help people when 50 inches of rain fall on them in a historic way, then what the hell are they there for? That's it. And I have no sympathy for this. And I see Senator Cruz, and it's disgusting to me that he stands in a recovery center with victims standing behind him as a backdrop, and he's still repeating the same reprehensible lies about what happened in Sandy. And it's unacceptable to me. Absolutely unacceptable. And I'm not going to let it get him away from it. And a lot of the reason why I've come on this show is to remind people that past is prologue. And if we allow this politics to be played by either party in the next few days, the only people who will suffer are the people in Houston who are suffering right now.
That is just amazing. Chris Christie seems like an elder statesman. He seems like he's got, some integrity here. It's just it's shocking. And only Ted Cruz could have accomplished that. See, because Cruz was an utter prick when it came to Sandy and the relief bill. An utter prick. And so were really the Republican Senate. I mean, 66 days for a superstorm funding bill for recovery, for emergency relief. I mean, 66, that's 2 months. You know that Houston right now is in this critical crunch time. You know, I'm in Florida. I know people, they accuse me of being Hollywood or whatever they want to, assign to me. I don't know why. I'm from Brooklyn. I am sitting in Florida. I have a house in Florida. I live in Florida. I've seen, I was a broadcaster during Hurricane Andrew, which was a Category 5, which was devastating. I mean, houses turned into little matchsticks. But after that, we changed our building codes. Just saying. Now houses are made out of poured concrete. Before, they were made out of wood. But anyway, I digress. So I've seen this stuff. You need emergency relief to be emergency, not 66 days out. In Houston right now, they are going into what? Today is Wednesday. So it started Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're into day 5 here. And frankly, I think this is sad to say, but I've seen it. This is the period in time where how long can you go without food? How long can you go without water? How long can you be out in the elements? How long can you be in a house that's full of water? How long can you survive? Becomes the issue you're grappling with. Okay, I don't know how else to put it. It's crunch time. It's literally crunch time in a city of 6.5 million people and surrounding counties, like 40-something, 50 counties, all in states of emergency. I mean, this is just, it sends a shiver down your spine. And, obviously we could talk about, the intensity of the storm and why it was so wet and what is wrong with building in a flood zone constantly and, the lax building. We do all that. But right now, it's about Trump's priorities, and he's out there trying to sell a spending bill. That's what a tax reduction is. It's a spending bill. You are taking money out of the Treasury and spending it in a certain fashion. And if it's tax relief, then that's the fashion that you are choosing to spend money in. Now, whether or not it benefits the middle class, that's a joke, because to look at what he's already proposed, and of course now he's only selling the vision that he has in his head. The last time he proposed anything, it was bullet points, and it was back in April, and it did cut all of these, emergency relief agencies. It cut across every single agency that he's depending on now to make him look good. I can't say this enough today. However, the tax breaks that he envisions, they $40 to somebody making $25,000, and we've gone over this, and almost $1 million to somebody making, more than $5 million a year. And of course, repealing the estate tax, which affects literally 5,600 families. You can shelter $11 million if somebody leaves that much money to you. You don't have to pay taxes. On 11, you can inherit 11. But 11 and 1, you have to start paying the estate tax. This is a bridge too far for Donald Trump. So he wants to take all this money out of these Medicaid was really his target, as you know. He wanted to take away Medicaid, and also there's an investment tax. There's like a 0.1%, 0.3% tax that people with large investment money, that they take out of their. It's not labor. It's not your hard work earning you money. It's not income like that. It's money making money for you income. And there's a small tax on money that makes money for you income if it's above a certain level, to help pay for Medicaid expansion, to help pay for subsidies to people who are less well situated in the economy, so that they could get a subsidy to help them pay for their health insurance. He wants to repeal that tax too, on the very, very now these are his priorities. Okay, this is just where his head is at. Not that you can score it, because he's never really written it down except in bullet points. Okay, so this is all we're going on, and he's out there advocating for this kind of spending, but not the kind of spending that's going to help people recover from this. It makes no sense. That's Ted Cruz too. That's Mike Pence too. When Mike Pence was on the floor back in the Katrina days, Mike Pence didn't want to spend the money on Katrina relief either, unless it was offset. Now, what does that mean? It means, well, if you want to spend money, $1 on Katrina relief, you got to take $1 out of something else. But this is not what they're proposing with the tax cuts. They're not saying, oh, if you want to give a tax cut to the wealthy, then you got to take $1 out of. They were saying, let's take all the money out of Medicaid and use it to pay for a tax cut, which is why everyone on my side who was against that were telling you this is a tax vehicle. This is a vehicle to transfer the Medicaid trust fund into tax cuts for the wealthy. But that failed. Okay, the president with a Republican House and a Republican Senate with a pen in his hand and a Republican Supreme Court that would probably rubber stamp any of these things that he did, couldn't get it done. So he doesn't have a pool of money for these tax cuts now. And it was it's billions. They scored his idea, his vision back in April, and it's like trillions and trillions of dollars. So it's got to, but they're not looking for offsets there. But Pence was when it came to Katrina.
Mr. Speaker, Katrina breaks my heart.
Yeah, right.
When I consider its tragic aftermath, the ancient parable comes to mind, and the rains descended, and the flood came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash.
Then build an ark.
For most American families, when a tree falls on your house, you tend to the wounded, you rebuild, and then you figure out how you're going to pay for it.
Okay, who does that? Can I just ask you that? Who does that? I mean, so my roof gets blown off in a hurricane. I tend to the wounded, and then what do? I go to Home Depot, and I show up, and I say, trust me, I need tarp for my roof. I need lumber to replace, the struts or something on my house. I need, a bag of cement. I got to replace a wall, and I'll pay you later. That always works for me, right? That works for your family.
Later today, Congress will continue the work of funding the relief and recovery from Hurricane Katrina. And well, we should, by speeding more than $50 billion to FEMA and other agencies. But as we tend to the wounded, as we begin to rebuild, let us also do what every other American family would do in like circumstances and expects this Congress to do.
Okay, can I just say that this idea of making some sort of an equal comparison between your family's budget and the taxpayer-funded budget that they're in charge of is a ridiculous comparison. Does it hold any water? No, it doesn't hold any water. It's a trick question. Part of your budget in your family is your tax bill. When you get paid, taxes, some of them are already gone, okay? They're already taken out. You don't make the decision. The government made that decision for you. Then they take this money and they pretend, well, we have to behave just like your family behaves. We are going to tend to the wounded. Then we're going to charge something, at Home Depot, and then we'll worry about paying for it later, but not the government. The government's got to figure out how to pay for Katrina before it pays for Katrina. What? I mean, none of it makes any sense. He keeps on, juxtaposing. This is ridiculous. The government exists for the benefit of the people. You pay taxes so that you don't suffer in an emergency, so that somebody does come to rescue you, so that you do have national flood insurance as a backup plan, especially if you're building in a floodplain, which they shouldn't allow, but they do. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Let's figure out how we're going to pay for it. Congress must ensure that a catastrophe of nature does not become a catastrophe of debt for our children and grandchildren.
Then raise taxes. Then raise taxes to pay for the catastrophe, just like we used to. FDR sold war bonds. We sold all kinds of stuff to, support the World War II effort. My grandmother she knew how to take a quarter of a pound of hamburger and turn it into a giant meatloaf that fed her family of 6. You had to make do. Why don't they understand? Why don't they understand that they need more taxes, not less? These catastrophes are happening more frequently, not less frequently. These storms, while you may see fewer hurricanes, the intensity of the ones we get are much more catastrophic. And the margin of error, now you can see, is so... It's so important. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, do you get 6 inches of water or do you get 12 inches of water? It's the difference between dying and not dying. And these storms are intensifying. They're getting wetter. They're getting more rain out of them. They're getting, this wasn't a particularly giant hurricane. It wasn't. Yes, it got up to a Category 4 as it hit landfall. And if you were in its way, like down in Rockport, which is 200 miles south of Houston, they got the wind damage from the storm. But what you're seeing in Houston isn't the wind damage, it's the rain. It's the flooding. And that's what's killing people. And that's the problem with the storms. The storms are more intense. They are science deniers, and they won't admit that we've had, in the last 18 months, 3 500-year storms. What does that mean? It means the chance of that kind of intensity should be 1 in 500. We've had 3 1 in 500 storms in 18 months, and they still deny it. They still deny that there's any reason to prepare. Now, if your government isn't going to prepare, if your government's not going to have a plan, if your government's not going to rescue you, then dissolve the government. Seriously, it's outlived its usefulness. Outlived its usefulness. So Pence and Trump are out there today selling the people on the idea that our Treasury can do without. Our Treasury can give away more money to the wealthiest people in this nation in bigger chunks than we've ever given to them before, and now is the time to do it. Really? We double down in Afghanistan, so we're still at war. We hack at the State Department, so we can't come up with a diplomatic or political solution to Afghanistan. There is no military solution for North Korea either, but the president is threatening North Korea constantly. North Korea is shooting missiles and threatening us back. So obviously something's got to give, right? And you would think it would be diplomacy, but, Rex Tillerson created a fiefdom there and fired all the envoys, to all the places we need envoys to actually sit and negotiate with different parts of these governments so that we can come up with a political solution instead of a thermal global nuclear war solution, or instead of hey, let's privatize the war in Afghanistan and give, billions of dollars to Eric Prince. Betsy DeVos at education, sucking the public money out of the schools, and she's putting it into a for-profit education. So we can all do without. We can all do without, according to them. What is wrong with them? This is exactly what happened to us. Deregulation of the banks. George Bush lowered taxes in a time of war. And the economy just crashed in 2008. Some of us never recovered. Others of us are just beginning to.
Clear for takeoff. Randi Rhodes Air Force. Air Force. RandiRhodes.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Round and round, can't you see what 15 means to me? What 15 means to me? Food for my baby, bills getting paid. Food for my baby, bills getting paid. What 15 means to me? What 15 means to me? Oh, 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 oh.
Fast food workers who are not giving up the fight to raise wages sat in at Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner's office when he vetoed a state Senate minimum wage bill that would have taken the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2022. State chambers of commerce cheered the news that workers would have to keep suffering at $8.25 an hour. But Melinda Reed, who joined the protest over Rauner's veto, sees nothing to cheer about in keeping workers down with poverty wages.
How can we keep up if it doesn't go up? It's got to go up. I'm praying that it goes up. And I'm praying that Rauner will have a heart change and be given understanding that he might see it has to happen. We need that. Have mercy.
Round and round, can't you see what 15 means to me?
Thanks to the Los Angeles County Labor Federation and the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Dwayne Hulbert is getting a solid second chance at life. Hulbert spent time behind bars for both drug and robbery crimes.
Well, I was out there, in the streets doing what I had no business doing, got incarcerated. I came home. Once I tried to get hired on with well-known companies, because of my felony, I was rejected. I got a little distraught, disheartened, and went back to my old life.
But he found ARC and got into an apprentice boot camp program to become a union apprentice in the building trades. The Los Angeles Orange County's Building and Construction Trades Council, the LA County Federation of Labor, and Los Angeles Trade Technical College all teamed with ARC to run the program. Dwayne Hulbert is in the third class of formerly incarcerated people to graduate from the apprentice boot camp. He'll be a plumber apprentice, and he's very grateful to the labor movement for helping give him this second chance at life.
There's a great difference from a job and a career, okay? And working with the unions, it is a career, something you can grow with and grow in. And the LA Fed has been instrumental in getting me connected with the people who can get me a career in the unions. I can't say enough about them. Being in the union, it's a brotherhood. It's longevity. It's stability. It gives me a second chance on life.
Let's get America working. We must build, maintain, and repair our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Teamsters support a bipartisan approach to creating good jobs for American workers. Learn more at letsgetamericaworking.com. Teamsters strong, America stronger.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing General Robert E. Lee's appeal to President Andrew Johnson to have his citizenship restored. On October 2, 1865, Lee completed and signed the necessary amnesty oath and sent it to Washington. He died 5 years later, having never received a response. There's no record that President Johnson ever saw Lee's amnesty oath. The most accepted story is that the oath was received by Secretary of State William Seward, who had no intention of helping Lee. Seward may have given the oath to a friend as a souvenir, or possibly even sold it. But one sure fact is that it disappeared until 1970, when a worker in the National Archives, going through post-Civil War State Department files, discovered a document that read, Office of the Notary Public, Amnesty Oath. Join us again for Senate Resolution 23. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
Yeah, when you look at the survival rate of people, how many days they can go without food, how many days go without water, we're starting to hit that crunch point this weekend for how many days people can go without water and food, based on what they had in their homes. And this is going to be an extensive search because it's so big. If you're going to do a doctrinal search, every home has to be approached. You knock on it first. There's nobody answer. You move on till everybody get the knock. Then you go back and based on whether you heard somebody in there or not, you have to go in that home and see if there's any people animals or remains in that home. And when you look at the size from Corpus Christi all the way now into Port Arthur and Beaumont, this is enormous, Brooke. So I do think we're going to have to scale up, because you cannot use volunteers for those type search. The volunteers work for search and rescue. You have to have certified coroner and medical people to handle remains. You can't use the volunteers for that, and federal troops along with, if you're going to use them, and National Guard with police to make entry into private property. So the second phase of this, going into homes and doing a recon, is going to be a lot more complex, and I don't think they've scaled up enough to be able to do this in a timely manner, because until you search everything, you can't let people back in.
Oh, geez. You know who that was? That's Lieutenant General Honore from New Orleans, from the Katrina, operation. I mean, this guy has seen it all. What do we have? Like 1,821 people killed in Katrina. I mean, he's seen everything. And he's talking about, we're just not, we're not prepared. He also said in another part of an interview I saw, he also said that if you didn't get your stuff in there before the storm, you're not getting it in now. It's a little late to start talking about, we're going to get water in there, we're going to get food in there. It's supposed to be in there ahead of the storm. You're supposed to have preparation. People game this out. He said over and over, it's too late to do a lot of what Abbott is saying needs to be done. And he didn't scale up enough. He didn't, But, oh, God, he's talking coroners. He's talking, going to 6.5 million homes, knocking on doors to see remains. Good God.
Yeah, when you look at the survival rate of people, how many...
Oh, I can't list that again. Oh.
Well, the authorities hold on as long as they can under the rubric of security. You can only go in if you live there. Then you can only go in after so many days after they've secured the power lines. But that only lasts for a few days, and people start finding ways to get into their homes. And then we need to start having more and more public messaging to make sure people have signed up for FEMA, and then start looking at how many have signed up. And the next thing is to make sure people are aware of the hazards on media and in the paper and classes here in these shelters, to make sure when they go in their home they don't do anything that will cause themselves to be made sick, such as handling mold, such as not handling cleaning equipment right, such as going in your home and your gas is still on or the electricity is still on and there's water, and you get yourself accidentally injured, or the operation of a generator. So we still got a lot of work to do in that area.
Oh, God. Now, this is the biggest petrochemical center in the United States. And this water is going to be uber disgustingly polluted. It's going to be full of chemicals, not to mention the mold, and the mold is deadly, and the down power line. I mean, electricity and water do not mix, and I mean, this is a long ass haul. And so, you have to look at who Texas put in charge of them. You have to sit there and say, really, Ted Cruz is gonna, be able to do this? Senator Cornyn, they're full of enough compassion and empathy and brains and wherewithal and these people, that they've picked to represent them are good.
But a lot of people are pointing out that you voted against aid for Sandy after that catastrophic storm up in the Northeast, that package back in 2012. And they're pointing at you and saying you're asking for money now when you weren't willing to help the people in the Northeast. What do you have to say to them?
Well, look, there's time for political sniping later. I think our focus needs to be on this crisis and this disaster.
These are people who needed money and who needed funding right after that storm. I covered those people. Many of them, just like those in Houston, lost absolutely everything they owned.
Well, Katie, of course that's right. And the accurate thing to say is that I and a number of others enthusiastically and emphatically supported hurricane relief for Sandy. Hurricane relief and disaster relief has been a vital federal role for a long, long time, and it should continue. The problem with that particular bill is it became a $50 billion bill that was filled with unrelated pork. 2/3 of that bill had nothing to do with Sandy.
That's a lie.
And what I said then and still believe now is that it's not right for politicians to exploit a disaster and people are hurting to pay for their own political wish list. Disaster relief needs to be focused on the victims of disaster relief.
He's standing in a shelter using the people who are living in a shelter as his backdrop for political purposes, lying to Katie Tur that he was enthusiastically for the Sandy relief bill. He voted against it. Okay, what he voted for, and this is how they do it. They give themselves cover. Mick Mulvaney, who's now your budget director, who wants to slash all of these, emergency and all of these, all of these parts of government that come to help you. Okay, from NOAA and the hurricane hunters all the way to the, the National Weather Service that, gives the forecast to people who are preparing on the ground, like, FEMA and the National Guard. He's also proposing cuts to the Coast Guard. Okay, all this stuff, all right? All this stuff is on. This man is just sitting there. So Mick Mulvaney, our budget director, who's for all these cuts across the board, he introduced, back then he was in the House, he introduced a bill that they could vote for that had like 1/10 of the funding that was needed for Hurricane Sandy, so that they could say, oh, we voted for Hurricane Sandy, for a Hurricane Sandy bill, not the bill, not the one that was meaningful, not the one that had the relief, not the one that would actually helped people. No, they voted for a bill, the wrong bill, a bill that disintegrated, a bill that nobody else voted for, but they do it so that they can say that they voted for something, and then at a later date hope that you're so stupid and that nobody will remember that they were against this bill, and now they're lying about it.
Senator Cruz's, accusation that 2/3 of the Sandy bill was pork is absolutely ridiculous. Washington Post did a fact check on it yesterday.
These are his
that is consistent with what I remember at the time. There was a Senate bill that had some of that, and it all got stripped out because all of us, including the people in New Jersey, objected to it. They were playing politics with it, okay? They were all getting ready to do what they wanted to do for 2016 and make themselves seem like the most conservative person. The fact of the matter is there's not a liberal conservative way to deal with people who are drowning and dying.
Strong comment, Senator. What are you looking for in Harvey?
Well, look, I'm sorry that there are politicians who seem really desperate to get their names in the news and are saying whatever they need to do that.
He's a prick. And now he's a lying prick.
We have a crisis on the ground of people who are hurting right now, people who are in harm's way, whose lives and families are in jeopardy as we speak. And I'll tell you, my focus, and I wish the focus of others, would be on saving the lives that are being threatened. I have been spending much of the past week. I've been in Houston for the past week, almost nonstop. And I've been spending much of the past week trying to coordinate federal, state, and local search and rescue efforts, make sure we have the assets on the ground, make sure we have helicopters and boats and high water trucks, make sure we're able to get the resources to the people who are in need. And I think that should bring us together. Now, when the storm passes, and it will pass entirely, hopefully in the next couple of days.
Look at this.
The communities will begin to rebuild, and that's going to be a long process. And it's a process that's set out by statute. The FEMA statute sets out a formula for calculating how disaster relief works, the funds that are available, the loans that are available for people to rebuild their homes, to rebuild their businesses. That is a long standard formula, and I think we can fully expect that Congress will step up in a serious way to meet what is going to be an enormous need. The damage has been devastating. No one right now has calculated the magnitude of the damage because everyone is rightly focused on saving lives. There is a time in the process where you work on rebuilding, but the first priority has to be saving lives. And when we move forward, I think we will see Congress act united to provide the relief to the citizens of Texas that they're entitled to under federal law.
Right.
I know we have the commitment of the president. The president unequivocally gave his strong commitment to doing so. And, for folks who are focused on raising political shots and snipes about the Sandy bill, facts matter. And a simple fact is that Sandy bill was over $50 billion, and 70% of it
was non-emergency. Only 30% of the funding was emergency funding for the victims of Sandy.
Look at them just sit there, and it's yeah, that's right. Okay, emergency spending, emergency funding should be an emergency. It should they should have gone back to work. Right? They don't go back to work till next week. The money should be there in the pipeline, ready to be dispersed. You just heard General Honore. We're at crunch time now. People are going to die in the next few days because of lack of water and food. They didn't prepare, okay? They didn't know what they were doing. He didn't appropriate enough people or funds. He says he's been working for 5 days. You know what? There were only 3,000 National Guardsmen for 6.5 million people whose homes have to be knocked on. I mean, this is ridiculous. Oh, and, Sandy, let's leave the Sandy bill took 66 days to pass because they were in charge of the House and the Senate, because Republicans were in charge of the House and the Senate, and because New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut weren't their type of place. They didn't vote the right way. Well, I got news for you. Neither did Houston. That's the scary part. I already saw them last night on Fox attacking the mayor of Houston. It's his fault. You watch. It's his fault. Meanwhile, Abbott said, listen to your local officials. Don't ask me what to do. Don't ask me. I mean, if I were you, I'd leave. If I were you, I'd go up north. But listen to your local officials, and blow. And so now they're saying, well, the mayor of Houston got it all wrong, and it's his fault. It's his fault. He doesn't command the budget of the state of Texas, nor does he command the federal budget, nor does he command the National Guard. The governor does. I mean, this is just insane. And these freaking Republicans, 66 days for an emergency spending bill. Katrina was 6 days. 6 freaking days. 66 days. I swear to God, I'm so disgusted with this Ted Cruz and this Senator Cornyn and this Governor Abbott and the National Flood Insurance Program. I mean, I'm telling you, I know what's going to happen to these people when they file their claims. This is going to be ugly. Fugly. That's how ugly it's going to be. Jay in Nevada.
Hey, Randy, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
I'm also reading here that Donald Trump is wanting to cut the Coast Guard by $1.3 billion. And the head of the Coast Guard is saying, no. We got 25 cutters that are over 50 years old that need replacing.
Listen, I mean, his priorities are all about, people like him. His priorities, and this is what I'm trying to show you with Ted Cruz. His priorities are people who vote for him, or people who talk like him, or people who sound like him, or people, who live in. That's why the Northeast can go to hell when they get slammed. But Texas, now this is going to need, he's talking, Sandy was $50 billion. Wait till you see the price tag for this one.
Yeah, exactly, and it is kind of amazing how with Sandy, Ted Cruz was saying no.
Why does this happen? It happens because they don't want to believe that these storms are going to get wetter and wetter and wetter.
Right.
They don't want to understand, and that they have the most lax building codes in Texas, and Houston is one giant floodplain, which you can now see. And that they've been allowing all this building to go on. So
and now the building codes are going to go away. Since how Trump took away that
Obama's executive order that said if you're going to build in a floodplain, at least you got to build elevated. You got to put it at least 2-3 feet off the ground. You're going to have to build up. And Trump said, no, you can build anywhere, and we're going to pay for this. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And by the way, people are going to get stuck in the federal government, and the federal government's going to, want to keep its money, and it's not going to want to pay. And these people are going to be just roaming around the country with no place to go.
Exactly. Thanks, Randy.
It's just so sad. And of course, the Republicans in Congress have made this worse. I mean, Houston is full of runaway development in flood-prone areas. The federal government subsidizes these flood areas, subsidizes the building there by taking away the grass in the ground that absorbs all this water, by taking away and putting asphalt or concrete or whatever over it. It's man-made flooding.
The Randi Rhodes, Air Force. The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
Now, the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn presents the Green News Report.
It is one measure of how life has changed here that, like these waters, the standard for what constitutes an emergency keeps rising in this city.
Green News Report special coverage. Hurricane Harvey causes long-term, widespread devastation across Houston and southeast Texas, and it's not over yet.
That story and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We've pledged our full support as Texas and Louisiana battle and recover from this very devastating and historic storm. There's probably never been anything like this.
You got that right, Mr. President, on several counts. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I must admit the first I heard of Hurricane Harvey, then Tropical Depression Harvey, was from you on this Green News Report. You were earlier than most. Where are we now in this ongoing disaster as we go to air today?
Well, Houston remains paralyzed by non-stop rainfall and flooding caused by Hurricane Harvey, which made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane on Friday near Port Aransas, Texas. Harvey now ranks among the worst storms ever to hit the United States. Historic flooding has turned Houston, the nation's fourth largest city, into an inland sea. At least 9 deaths have been confirmed so far, and it is not over yet. National Weather Service forecasts that the slow-moving storm could dump another 2 feet of rain before it's done.
Another 2 feet of rain on top of the, about 2.5 feet that have already fallen?
Yes, these are unheard of numbers.
Yep.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has activated the entire Texas National Guard, and officials say first responders have rescued more than 3,000 people so far. FEMA estimates up to 30,000 people may require emergency shelters. In a Sunday press conference, Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner defended the decision to not issue mandatory evacuation orders, saying it wasn't clear where to send people to.
There was a lot of conversation about the direction in which Hurricane Harvey was going to go. No one knew which direction it was going to go. So it's kind of difficult to send people away from danger when you don't know where the danger is.
That's true. That said, we know that the danger was not to the north, and had they sent people to the north, they might have been able to get out of harm's way.
But logistically, it would have been difficult. Back in 2005, during the evacuation for Hurricane Rita in Houston, more people died in the massive traffic gridlock than from the storm itself. Houston's freeways serve as flood channels. Thousands could have been trapped on the freeways when the storm arrived.
True, and since nobody really knew that this storm was happening at all until about 48 hours before it ended up making landfall, yeah, I can't see how they would have gotten Houston's millions of people out of there in time or safely.
And keep in mind that these floodwaters are polluted. The Houston region is a hub for the petrochemical industry with extensive pipelines, refineries, chemical plants, and heavy industry. All of those facilities were inundated, along with sewage treatment plants. Regarding climate change, it will take time for scientists to determine the specific influence of global warming on this specific storm. But in general, climate scientists say global warming intensifies extreme weather impacts, like more frequent extreme rainfall events, and rising sea levels elevated Harvey's storm surge.
And it cannot go without notice that both scientists and activists have been warning, have been begging Houston officials and Harris County officials for years to do something about these flood concerns, the precise concerns, sadly, that have now come home to roost in Houston.
Yes, building codes, road construction, and flood mitigation in the Houston flood-prone area were not keeping up with the blistering pace of home building and real estate development. Developers shortchanged flood mitigation regulations and paved over some 30% of the regional wetlands that once provided natural flood control.
Where the switchgrass would have soaked up a lot of this water in any event, all of that is gone. It's now concrete.
Most Houston residents also don't have flood insurance. FEMA Director Brock Long on CNN on Sunday was blunt about the region's long road to recovery.
FEMA's going to be there for years, sir. This disaster is going to be a landmark event. We're setting up and gearing up for the next couple years.
And it's not just Houston. As we go to air, another tropical storm is brewing off the coast of South Carolina. And over in South Asia, at least 1,200 people have died from monsoon flooding across India, Bangladesh, and Nepal.
1,200 people?
So far.
If there's any bright side at all to what's going on in Houston, is so far the smaller than expected death count. That said, Houston's police chief told the AP on Monday that he's, quote, really worried about how many bodies we're going to find.
Indeed.
For much more on this story and all of the others we could not get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Every breaking wave on the shore tells the next one there'll be one more.
This has been the Green News Report on the top of the hour on the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn.
Mary had a little lamb. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
I surely am not his base, even though I voted for him. It was more, just to be honest, an anti-Hillary vote.
I liked his platform, Make America Great Again, keeping jobs in the United States.
My vote was more, I didn't want more of what we already had.
The thing that drives me crazy is all the tweeting he does. I don't pay any attention to it, but it's in the news. It's on the newscasts every day, evening, and night. My wife watches it. It drives me crazy because the television is on all the time.
Crazy.
Why?
Well, that was a lot of it, the tweeting. It has to stop.
Did you vote for him?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Because regardless of what he truly wants to get done, whatever that may be, he has got to be his own worst enemy. He couldn't be any worse at achieving goals in politics. What most disappoints me is he's such an incredibly flawed individual that has articulated many of the values that I hold dear. And the messenger is overwhelming the message. I wish he was on the opposite side of where I hold dear, because it would be better for the causes that I like.
As much as I thought he would be a quick learner and delegate to top-notch individuals,
the best people,
he hasn't done that.
We know he's a nut. Everybody knew he's a nut. But there comes a point in time where you need to become professional. He's not even professional, let alone presidential. Chill out, man.
What would you whisper into his ear, Russell?
Quit tweeting.
What would you whisper into his ear, David?
Stop picking on the media. Love them.
Brian, what would you whisper into his ear?
Start listening to other people.
Tony, what would you whisper?
Park the ego.
Wow, those are Trump voters, everybody. Those are Trump voters. Oh, the mood is getting sour. Yeah. They don't like him anymore. They don't like him. New polling today. Voter satisfaction. This is Fox News, by the way, their poll. Oh, this is bad. That there was a focus group. That is a focus group of, you know what those are, right? Where they take about 12 people and they put them in a room and then they ask them about a person or a product that they're trying to get deeper information on. I actually, I've been focused grouped. And the cruelest thing of all is to show, like when your boss has you focus grouped, which is why I'm my own boss now, because I will never do that to me. My focus group is the phone. People can call me up. My Facebook page, they write, whatever they write. My Twitter feed, they respond or they don't, or they do, and they're positive or they do. Do you know what I mean? But I had a boss, Mean Bob Green. Remember him? Yeah, the guys in there do, because they worked in that same joint, that same place that I worked. That's the Miami radio station. They had a general manager, General Mangler. His name was Bob Green. We used to call him Mean Bob Green because he was. And Bob was that guy. He was that guy that conducted meetings in his office while he was on the toilet. You know that guy? That's him. I mean, I actually had these experiences before, we had laws about, having meetings with women while you were in the bathroom going, leave the door open so I could talk. Seriously. And he was so mean that he actually organized a focus group. And, that's usual. That's normal. Networks do that. But Mean Bob Green was so mean that he made me sit through the video of my focus group where they had this woman who walked in there with like 80s shoulder pads and a clipboard and like a pencil stuck in her bun, and she looked really militant, and the questions were so stilted against whatever it was you were trying to find out about. So they said things like, how many of you know who Randi Rhodes is? And everybody, 12 hands go up in the air. How many of you hate her? Oh, great. So, they get paid a couple of shekels, right, to do this. So they all raise their, oh, my God. Meanwhile, we had the best ratings on that station, and Bob was trying to, negotiate a new contract with me and wanted to, get me out of the idea that I should make more than $42,000 a year. I'm serious. The other guys on the station who had great ratings, don't get me wrong. I mean, Neil Rogers, he had the most amazing radio. He was the most listened to guy in Miami, was on my station. But this guy, just for reference, made over $1 million for one radio market. Okay, it was only in Miami. It wasn't syndicated to any other place. He was that good. He really was that good. And so he was making $1 million, and he was coaching me when he found out that I was making $42,000 a year. I had the most listened to radio talk show host in Miami in my time slot. And he said, this is ridiculous. They're ripping you off, honey, is what he used to say. They're ripping you off, baby. They're ripping you off, honey. We actually started on the air a Pay the Bitch. Seriously, this is how bad it was back in the day, okay? Pay the Bitch Foundation, where people would call Mean Bob Green and call Boy Gary, who was the program director, and say, pay the bitch, because I would have left, which I did eventually because they wouldn't give me a raise. That's how I ended up in Palm Beach. I left Miami because they just wouldn't pay me. But Bob Green, in his negotiation, decided that he would show me this focus group to try and convince me that even though I had the best ratings in my time slot, that the people who listened hated me. To which I replied, people who hate you listen longer. But this was his technique. So he showed me this focus group of everyone hating on me. Oh, she sounds like a biker chick on Prozac. She sounds like a Maki fishwife. I hate Jews. I hate broads, whatever they said. So this is what that is right there. But this is a focus group of people who support Donald Trump, and the questions weren't leading questions like, why do you hate him? They were like, what do you think of him at this point in his presidency? And people who voted for him said, well, we all knew he was a nut. And people said, well, I want you to know mine wasn't really for him. It was an anti-Hillary vote, although the guy lied because he said he was a staunch conservative. He wishes Trump was on our side. He wishes Trump was a progressive because he's killing the conservative agenda, which this guy embraces wholeheartedly. Apparently, he thinks that, the 30 or 35% of the Fortune 500 companies who pay zero taxes need to pay less than zero. I don't know what his agenda is, but that is what he said. And that is what that is. So now Fox News does. This was separate. This was an independent focus group. This is the Fox News poll I'm about to read to you. Okay, this is unbelievable. And the headline of the conclusion of the Fox News poll of their viewers is, the headline is, Fox News poll, voters' mood sours. 56% say Trump is tearing this country apart. Whoops. Whoops. The number of voters happy with how things are going in the country is down 10 percentage points since April. It stands at just, and we're always going to have this, 35%. It hasn't been this low since 2013. At the same time, dissatisfaction has jumped to 64%, an 11-point increase.
It's obvious he can't control his mind or his tongue.
And it has nothing to do with the economy. Isn't that something, everybody? Isn't that something? The economy is actually doing fine. Obama has baked into the cake growth, as you know. You know, we have seen 3% GDP, 3% growth in this country many times under Obama. Not that you would ever know it from listening to the conservatives, but that is just a fact. And yesterday, the quarterly was that we were growing at 3%. It's about to get, tanked at least 1 percentage point because of all this damage that happened in Texas. I mean, insurance companies are going to have to pay out. Although, this is crazy. 8 in 10 people living in the flood zone that is known as Houston do not have flood insurance. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, who runs Geico, I mean, that's his insurance company, and he knows, how insurance claims affect the economy, said that you can expect that this hurricane is going to take at least a percentage point off of our GDP. So we made a 1 quarter here with Trump at 3% GDP growth, which is good. Not that we haven't seen it before. It's like I said, baked into the cake. The recovery that was orchestrated over the last 8 years prior to Trump was a solid recovery from a Great Depression, which is what we were living through in 2008. But anyway, so now we're looking at, the economy just taking a hit because of all of this. But anyway, so this shift in disapproval has nothing to do with the economy, which is rare. Usually when people are dissatisfied with a president, it's because the economy blows, and this economy doesn't blow. And even Fox News notes the shift is not tied to the economy. Positive views on the economy are higher in more than a decade. 36% say it's excellent or good. An additional 30% say it's good, in good shape. So you have like 66% of us saying the economy's it's okay. It's not bad. The last time that they responded that the economy was this good was when President Bush was president. Oh, how we laughed back in 2004. And of course, it was phony baloney, and it was the housing market, and it exploded. And obviously that had to do with deregulation, and it had to do with, liar loans, and it had to do with, the banks, the savings and loans merging with the investment banks so that the staunchly conservative savings and loans were now allowed to play the stock market. They were allowed to, gamble away your money, which they did, and it failed miserably. And so when Obama came, we had this great recession. Now, he immediately went to work building the economy, which he did. Because I say, in his presidency, we've had many quarters of 3% GDP. So, but nobody felt it because he was black. But Donald Trump is orange, and they're feeling it. They're feeling it. So that's fine. So that said, that this poll has zero to do with the economy, okay? But it's not the same for Trump. They don't like him. His job ratings are negative and increasingly negative. 56% feel, and this was the question they asked because it's Fox, and they ask, like, this is why I brought up my focus group. You could put it in a negative context to get the answer you're looking for. Do you know what I mean? You can they're called leading questions, and you can lead the question, and you could also put somebody in the front of the room that's intimidating or that looks like a real bitch to talk about a woman. In fact, I think I'm wearing the same outfit that I was wearing the day that Bob Greene made me watch my focus group all those years ago. If Neil was alive, he'd go, she's still wearing that damn floral dress. It's the same dress. I know. But it's not true for Trump. People don't like him. 56%. And then the question that they asked was they were trying to get a very strong question. Is he tearing this country apart? You know what I mean? And they expect people to go, no, he's not tearing the country apart. But guess what? Almost 60% of the people said he's tearing this country apart. 33%, it's always going to be that, 33% say he's bringing the country together. Or the way they phrased it, is he drawing the country together, which is very Southern. Is he fixing to bring the country together? Is he drawing the country? 33%. Now, 55% disapprove of the job he's doing as president. 41% approve, still too high. But that is a net negative of 14 points. That is his worst score to date. And that's Fox.
For a commercial-free, on-demand, whenever, wherever listening experience, visit RandiRhodes.com for your personal premium podcast today.
Yeah, you could buy tile at a chain store if you wanted to. You could wait for a kid to try and answer your questions about what's this made of, or how do I install it, or what's in stock. But what if you wanted serious craftsmanship? What if you wanted custom design, handmade, to order from your imagination, or an inspiration photo that you love? Probably you think you can't anymore, but I did. When it was time to shop tile, I came across a family-owned business that still handcrafts each and every individual tile, matching your colors, your inspiration, your design. Tempest Tile Works. They're based in Portland, Oregon, and they still handcraft the most magnificent tile. Let them match to your fabrics or to your countertops or to anything you can envision for your bath or kitchen. Teeny tiny tiles to oversized, their art or yours. It's all doable, it's all affordable, and it's all individually made just for your project. Visit Tempest Tile Works and look at their amazing gallery of designs and styles, and give up the chain stores. Tempest Tile Works, custom made. TempestTileWorks.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1864. That was the day the final battle of the Atlanta campaign began with the Battle of Jonesboro. The Union had been embroiled in a civil war with Confederate forces to end the slave labor system for 3.5 years. It had been a difficult summer. Battles were increasingly bloody, with casualties on both sides numbering into the tens of thousands. Criticisms intensified against key Union generals like Sherman and Grant. Pressure mounted against President Lincoln to end the war and withdraw the Emancipation Proclamation if necessary. General William T. Sherman mounted the Atlanta campaign earlier that year in May. His forces scored a number of victories throughout the summer, but could not decisively defeat Confederate forces. By August, Northern morale was so low that the Republican National Committee deemed Lincoln unelectable. The Democratic National Convention, convening in Chicago, had declared the war a failure and planned to ride to victory over Lincoln in the November elections. But Lincoln's commitment to emancipation was unwavering, and Sherman did not disappoint. He understood that Atlanta was, as historian Eric Foner describes it, a key railroad hub and the communications and transportation center for the
Randi Rhodes Air Force.
You're listening to the Progressive Voices Network, and here's a clip from Tara Buster with comedian Tara Devlin from RDTDaily.com.
When they talk about the deep state, to them, it's anybody who gets in the way. It's anybody who believes in democracy. You're in bed with the deep state. Any lefty that talks about the deep state, you're not a lefty, you're an idiot. Any right-wing person who talks about the deep state, I'm expecting that from them because they're stupid. But the deep state, what's the deep state? Anybody who gets in the way of fascism. That's the deep state. Anybody who maybe has a glimmer in their eye for democracy. Anybody who wants to promote the general welfare over the welfare of the corporate elite. That's the deep state. You know, when they talk about draining the swamp, and now that's another tag word. You know, when I heard drain the swamp, as a normal person, I translated that to getting rid of money in politics. That's the swamp. It's the oligarchy. It's the big-moneyed interests who have used government as an appendage to their affairs, right? No, when they talk about draining the swamp, how did I know that they meant that they would be getting on their knees for Goldman Sachs? That's what they meant. It's more of a graphic image. Draining the swamp for them, they're literally filleting Goldman Sachs. That's Drain the Swamp.
This is Tara Devlin from RDTDaily.com. That was a clip from my show, Tara Buster. Join us for the live recording every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern at FYINation.com. Or catch the replays starting Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Progressive Voices, or anytime on demand on the Progressive Voices app. Support the Progressive Voices Network and tell your friends. Remember, we stick together, we win.
Hey, Progressive Voices listeners, I'm Rebecca Vallis, host of Off Kilter, powered by the Center for American Progress Action Fund. This week, I speak with Emily Badger at the New York Times Upshot about the showdown over how we define fringe views in America. Let's take a listen. So before we talk about the process by which some of those lines are blurring, and that is a lot of what I want to talk to you about, as well as sort of how we've gotten there, your piece looks, and you look both through conversations with sociologists, as you mentioned, but also through lots and lots of really decades of polling data at topics and ideas, concepts that, as you term it, once actually seemed radical that have now in recent years gained wider acceptance. Ideas like there being a black president, or interracial marriage, or same-sex marriage, having a gay president, on and on. What is it that you learned from the sociologists that you spoke with for this piece about how social change happens?
Well, there's really been this dramatic transformation in Americans' views, or what we're sort of describing as social norms, around all kinds of things that have to do with race and gender and sexuality. So, 50 years ago, you wouldn't even have had a majority of Americans saying that they would support interracial marriage or fair housing laws or same-sex marriage, but today a vast majority, 75, 80, 90% of Americans say that they are on board with these things. Interracial marriage in particular is one of the single most striking transformations in American polling over the last half decade, and that's that, something like 4% of Americans said that they approved of blacks and whites marrying in 1960, and today